The meeting of the Lee District SSPA Task Force. I'm the chair, Ed Joseph. And as I'm sure everyone's gotten used to at this point, since we're conducting this meeting electronically, there's a script I need to run through before we get started to establish that our authority to meet online. So I will ask everyone's patience as I run through this. So to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by the Freedom of Information Act and the Emergency Ordinance, the Lee District SSPA Task Force needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. First, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and in appropriate volume for all the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each task force member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. And it is sufficient to just say I'm participating from home. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. So I will begin the roll call now. Robert Livingstone.
Robert Livingstone, home.
Thank you. Carol Allen. Carol, I know you're out there somewhere.
I believe in the chat it says she signing in again. She couldn't hear.
I'm sorry,
Ed, she put a note in. You saw the chat.
She signed it in again. She put it in the chat that she has to sign in again because she couldn't hear.
No, if somebody could just tell her that she just needs to answer up while I call the roll.
She left the meeting and she has to come back.
Oh, okay. I will come back to Carol. Thank you. I didn't understand what she was saying. Rand Pixa. Andy Bernick.
Andy Bernick from home.
Thank you. Pamela Pineros.
Pamela Pineros from home.
Thank you. Leslie Hatch. The alternate. Leah Lamba Skidmore.
Leah Lamba Skidmore from home.
Thank you. Larry Dempsey.
Larry Dempsey from home.
Thank you. You know what? I should have been. Is someone? I don't know if anyone's keeping track of the number, but I haven't been doing that. I'm sorry. So we had, just to review, we had Robert, we had Andy, Pamela, Leah. Forgive me. Did I call Larry? I may have called your name. I'm not sure.
Yes, you did call me, and Larry Dempsey at home.
Good. Thank you. Jane Kelly.
Kelly from home.
Thank you. John Schaefer. Jeff Safel. Or alternate Sona Safel. Tom Rickard. Cindy Potter. Jay Dick, alternate. Jim Drinkard.
Jim Drinkard from home.
Thank you. Rosemary Clay, I believe, is not with us. Liz Murphy, alternate. Holly Doherty.
Hi, Ed. Holly Doherty. I'm in Rose Hill.
Thank you. Don Tennant? Don? No. Carl Sell? Marta Morrissey? Marta, I thought I saw your name.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, could you please state your name and where you are?
Yeah, Marta Morrissey calling in from home.
Thank you. Steve Levinson? Steve? No, I know you're there, Steve.
Does it help to unmute?
It does help indeed.
All right. All right, sorry about that. Steve Levinson, calling in from home, which is in beautiful downtown Springfield.
Thank you. Tom Sachs?
Tom Sachs from home.
Thanks, Tom. Jim McCracken? Alternate Juliana Sharp? Alternate Rachel Dexter? John Tomko?
John Tomko from home.
Richard Dresner?
Richard Dresner from home.
Thank you. Jonna Gagnon?
Donna Gagnon from home.
Thank you. Okay, I count 14 plus myself is 15, so we have our quorum.
I was able to get in, Ed.
Oh, Carol, good.
I had to come in on the phone. I can't hear anybody on my computer.
I see. So just state your name and where you are then.
Carol Allen at home.
Great. Very good. So I will now, okay, forgive me, I seem to be less organized than normal here. My apologies. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the Vice Chair, Tom Sachs. So I may be heard to make 3 necessary motions.
Do I hear a motion from the floor?
Well, yes, you do. I move that every member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Lee District SSPA Task Force.
Second the motion.
In favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Any more motions from the floor?
Yes. Second, I next move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that as such, the Freedom of Information Act's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the Track a Plan Amendment page of the SSPA website, located at https://www.fairfaxcounty.gov/planning-development/track-plan-amendment, or by calling 1-844-621-3956, TTY 711, and entering access code 173-904-5277. It is so moved.
Is there a second?
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
All extent, any extent, assumptions? Pass? It,
All right.
the motion is passed.
Okay, one more motion. I move that this meeting must be conducted online during the current emergency in order to discharge the lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities of the Lee District SSPA Task Force.
Second, is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is passed.
Thank you, Tom. I take back the virtual gavel. Thank you. So tonight, we will continue our consideration of the Van Dorn TSA proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan with a presentation by the Department of Transportation regarding the upcoming transportation study, followed by a presentation by David Stinson and other members of the planning and development staff regarding issues related to land use, the environment, schools, and parks. At appropriate times, we will open the floor to questions and comments generated by the presentations as we go along. At the end of the presentations, we will have probably a short period for any general comments or questions from members of the public and the task force. But we must reserve some time at the end of the meeting tonight to discuss plans for our future meetings, which will likely need to be in person with an added online element so that we can include members of the public and any members of the task force who are not able to attend in person. As always, interested members of the public are encouraged to provide us with their comments. The time for public comments during meetings is limited by the need to take care of our business. The time for public comment will vary from meeting to meeting depending on the time available. Public comments can always be submitted for the consideration of the task force by email at leedist, that's LEEDIST, at fairfaxcounty.gov. Before each Monday meeting, comments received by Friday at 10 a.m. will be distributed to the task force members prior to the Monday meeting. And with that, I am finished my script and we can proceed to tonight's presentations. So whoever's here from the Department of Transportation is welcome to take it away.
I have this is David Stinson from Department of Planning and Development. I have the presentation.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Oh no, but DOT will be presenting as well, but I just need someone to give me the share screen function so I can pull up the presentation.
Would that be you, Steve Waller?
I think it would be Steve. If Steve's a
I'm sorry, I'm on the other line with Jeff trying to get him into the meeting. So I will give you, let's see, I will make you the presenter now, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
Okay. Let's see, I'm on my iPad. I think it's gonna let me join. Hold on a second.
Okay.
See if it'll let me join. It's telling me I'm connecting. Okay. I'm on my iPad.
Okay, I shall start the presentation. I am David Stinson with the Department of Planning and Development, and before you is the agenda of the topics that we plan to cover this evening. I will start by providing an overview of the Van Dorn TSA study timeline. Then Arbita Chatterjee from Fairfax County Department of Transportation will provide an overview of the scope of the transportation study. Additionally, I'll provide an overview of the analysis of land use considerations, phasing conditions, the environment, schools, and projected student yield and parks. Additionally, county staff that are subject matter experts for the topics covered this evening will be present to answer any questions during the discussion. The graphic before you depicts the timeline for the Van Dorn TSA study. During the SSPA screening process in 2019, the task force and staff reviewed the 2 nominations that comprise this plan amendment and recommended to add them to the work program. The plan amendment was then authorized by the Board of Supervisors on January 26, 2021, which authorized a more detailed analysis of the nominations and subsequent plan amendment. Currently, staff is performing an analysis of the proposed plan amendment, and we will share some of the findings this evening. The results of the transportation analysis will be shared with the task force this fall. We anticipate the task force and staff will provide a recommendation for this plan amendment in winter or spring of 2022. And after that, a staff report will be published. The Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors hearings are anticipated for spring of 2022. Okay, we're going to start with the topic of transportation. And again, Arpita Chatterjee from Fairfax County Department of Transportation is here to inform the task force about the process and scope of the transportation study. And before I turn it over to Arpita, I want to review the recommendations for Land Unit D in the Van Dorn TSA, which is where the proposed nominations are located. The adopted comprehensive plan states that traffic capacity is limited, constraining the extent and character development until suitable road improvements are made. This constraint impacts the entire Van Dorn TSA, and the transportation study will analyze the transportation network for this area. I will now turn over the presentation to Arpita. Just bear with me, I need to pull up her presentation.
Okay, well, while we're waiting, I'll just mention that I see that Jeff Seffel is with us. So we have one more member present. Welcome, Jeff.
Can everyone see my screen by any chance?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. And I want to turn it over to Arpita.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Arpita. Fine. Is everybody having trouble hearing her?
I don't hear anything.
I can't either.
Nothing.
No.
Nope.
She does not appear to be muted.
You might want to check the microphone settings on your laptop or device.
Right.
What we may want to do.
I could
Go ahead. Do you want to give it, or we can move this item to the end?
Yeah.
I could get the transportation discussion started if Arpita is unable to.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and get started, Tom, and then Arpita, if you're able to change your device, chime in, and we'll let you know if we hear you.
Yeah, I don't know if it might make sense for her to perhaps sign out and sign back in. Just a thought. I see she's
We're not hearing you. Go ahead and use Teams chat or the chat, and we'll try to work with you. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, well, I'll be working with Arpita on the transportation analysis. The transportation analysis will actually be done by the applicant in this case, or the 2 applicants. We're still kind of working out details in that respect, but we can definitely speak in general terms today. But just keep in mind that the applicant will have consultants and they'll have some words about how this analysis should go. But I think for the most part, what I'm about to share with you is going to provide the general framework for the analysis. So, any good transportation analysis starts with intersection traffic counts, where we go out and we get existing traffic data. We had a couple year period where we were a little bit unsure about whether we could go out, but we're pretty confident in the fall when schools are back to 5 days a week that we'll be able to collect some sound traffic data to use as the basis for the analysis. Trip generation would be for the two sites, the land units D and E. We will use trip generation. We'll get into a little bit more detail, but it's just basically a industry standard that's used across the country to, it's based on land uses and intensities, and it's how we estimate trip generation for different land uses and different intensities. We use a model to estimate growth rates. We'll get into that so that we can look at a year 2040 horizon, look at those 2040 future traffic volumes. We want to make sure that things are working. The comp plan is a 20+ year tool that we have to provide guidance for land use and other plans. So we definitely want to look out to year 2040 or 2045 for this analysis so that we can be sure that we're looking towards a good horizon year. Then we're going to eventually get to the point where we determine whether there's mitigation necessary and draw any conclusions. That took a little bit longer. Next slide. This is a flow chart. Hopefully we simplified it enough for people to see. The blue boxes are the big steps. You start with existing conditions. We do look at future baseline conditions. What happens if these two sites develop as they are currently planned? That's kind of our baseline. We want to compare that to the proposed analysis. We feed traffic counts and growth rates into the existing conditions and to get to the future baseline. Trip generation provides the actual trip generation for the proposed sites. So we're able to analyze all three of the scenarios: existing, future baseline, and future proposed. Again, existing would be 2021, presuming that everything's on track in the fall and we feel comfortable collecting traffic data. Future baseline would be 2045 with current plans in place. So what happens if we don't do anything? How is it going to develop? We want to see what kind of operations there are. And then the proposed 2045 would be with the changes in land uses that are being proposed. And then, we look at what mitigations are necessary and what needs to go into the comprehensive plan and make some final recommendations. So this is kind of a repeat of the last slide, but kind of graphically. And the measures of effectiveness over on the left, we'll get into. That's how we compare the different scenarios. Next slide. Measures of effectiveness are ways that we can compare and contrast different scenarios, how well things are performing, how well our solutions are achieving our objectives and our desired results. They can be both qualitative and quantitative. They can be number-based. They can be more of a qualitative based. One MOE, if any of you are veterans to the public process, have been on past task forces, you've probably heard the term level of service. We'll get into that a little bit later, but level of service is a metric that we use to gauge how well traffic is flowing. Oh, you're back.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, but before he continues, I just want to remind everybody who's not speaking to mute yourselves. At least what I'm hearing is not as clear as I would like it to be, and I think there might be some static on the line from people not being muted. So,
well, just to finish this slide, and then Arpita can take over. We also want to introduce multimodal metrics that can gauge how well bicycles and pedestrians are able to get through and to the metro station. We think since this is a transit station area, it is important that we look at bicycles and pedestrians and transit as well. There are bus routes that go by the site on at Oakwood Road and South Van Dorn that would also allow people to get to the metro station via bus. There's also pedestrian facilities and bicycle facilities Can they be improved? Sure. And I think that's part of the process that we'll be embarking on, is looking at what's out there and what can we do to achieve better bicycle, pedestrian, transit, and automobile type metrics. Arpita, you want to take the next one?
Okay, thanks, Tom. Next slide, please. This is an example of the qualitative performance of the measures of effectiveness. As Tom explained in his previous, in the previous slides, measure of effectiveness is an assessment criteria that we use to measure the performance of the analysis and to see how well we can achieve our goals and objectives. Level of service is one of them, and a very important one of them. As you can see, level of service goes from A through F, where the comprehensive plan always would like to target level of service D. Why so? Because it's an optimum utilization of the resources. If you look at the diagram below, level of service D is where you have the right amount of car on the road, so there is no wastage of resource. Whereas A, B, and C, there is a lot of wastage of resource. So we target to have level of service D. However, in transit station areas around them where the density is high, and where we have transit as a mode of transportation, we aim for a level of service E. We give that leeway. And level of service F is something we always would like to avoid. So this is one of the MOE. Next slide, please. Then there's a qualitative performance of the MOEs. Some of the list of criteria for consideration is the traffic operations, pedestrian connectivity, feasibility for low stress bike facilities, transit. This is just some of the list that we use in order for us, and this becomes our MOEs, the assessment criteria. As you can see, the index on the right-hand side that has good, average, fair, poor. What we try to achieve is something which is good and average and maybe fair. Now, we do not want to achieve anything that is poor, and we do not want to have something that is very good at the cost of something else being very poor. So there needs to be a balance at what we are trying to achieve. And overall development, and overall community-wide development. Next slide, please. So after the MOEs, we come to the traffic data collection. This is where actually the consultants go to the field and we collect traffic at each and every intersection. Since this project has not yet been scoped by the consultant, we've picked up these intersections along Mandon Street, but once it's scoped out, there may be some additions or some deletions in the intersection. So this is the starting point. At this point, we actually go to the field, we count the traffic that's there for each and every intersection, we look at the queue, and we look at the left, throughs, rights, etc., the lane geometry, and we gather field data. Next slide, please. So just to get into more details, what do we do after we collect data from the field? We look at the queuing at all of this. This is a hypothetical example, so I've added the cars just on the lane for you all to have an understanding what we're looking at. I'm sure nothing is so queued along Mandon Street or at the intersection of Oakwood Road. This is very hypothetical, but what we try to see is what the queue is, what the delay for each and every movement, left, through, and right is, and the associated level of service with the delay. And from there, we kind of get an understanding of what the existing conditions of that intersection is, how that intersection is performing today, currently in the field out there. This we do for all the intersections where we collect the traffic data. And as mentioned here, it's a very important component of the transportation analysis process. Next slide, please. So once we get the traffic data from the intersection, we know what's out there today, but we have to grow it to get what the future volumes will be. And that's an estimate. In order for us to get the best estimate and for us to know that we are getting the best traffic volumes for the future, we have to go through the process of getting the data from the Metropolitan Washington Council of Government, MWCOG's travel demand model. This is a very standard procedure that is followed nationwide. Most MPOs, they have a regional travel demand model which has traffic levels forecasted based on projected land uses throughout the region, including population and employment. And this is done repeatedly year after year so that we are more and more close to what the economic forecasts are going to be. because it changes over time. And that is why this keeps on every year. We have a fresh round of forecast that's been given to see that we make a good estimate. So we use the growth rate from here and apply that to the field data that we have. And that gives us an approximate and a good estimation of what the future traffic volume is supposed to be. The model that gives us the data is validated and calibrated. So that gives more credibility to the model as to the data that we are extracting from the model is more true to what the real world scenario would be 40 years down the road or 30 years down the road, whatever the horizon year is. Next slide, please. This is we are getting the growth rate and establishing future base year traffic volumes. When we say future base year traffic volumes, if you remember the flow chart, we are actually estimating what the current comprehensive plan is going to give us. The current comprehensive plan, what is there in the plan out there, 2040, what the plan is going to give us. We are going to get that condition determined by just first applying the growth rates to the traffic count.
This is actually trip generation.
Yeah, I know, sorry. Now then we go to the next, then we look at what the proposed land use change is. And to look at the proposed land use change, we first look at the trip generation. So since I don't have control on the slide, I was actually explaining that the last slide, based on what we had in the flow chart, we've just determined what the future baseline will be. Now we are in the process of determining what the future proposed land use conditions or transportation conditions would be based on the proposed land use change. And we start with trip generation. Again, trip generation is something that is, the Institute of Traffic Engineers have developed a web-based application for all of us. Again, this is a standard norm that's followed nationwide. It has a land use input parameter. What we do is we put in the land use values there. It goes through a set of equation or rates. It has its own reasons for either using an equation or a rate. And then it gives us the trips generated associated with that particular land use change. So that is the raw output. Then there are other considerations that are applied. Suppose it's a transit station area where there is transit facility, where there is good travel demand, transportation demand management facilities available, there is reduction in the trips. We assume a certain amount of reduction in the trips. So that consideration is given, but it is given on a case-by-case basis, depending on where the data is collected, what the study area constitutes of. Now, next slide. So from the trip generation, as you can see over here, this is a very important state. We apply the numbers of the trip generation to the future baseline traffic scenario. That is what was there in the current comprehensive plan. We added to it. So when we make a comparison and we see that there is a shortage from what the future has, we delete the numbers. Or else if it's an increase, then we increase the numbers. Both ways, we get a comparison of what the scenario will be between what the current comprehensive plan has and what is being proposed right now. The analysis results will be compared in that fashion, and it will be compared against the MOEs. How is the MOE performing with the current comprehensive plan, and what MOEs are we seeing with the proposed land use change? Now, since the proposed land use change is an interest for the community, what we do, if there is a problem with the proposed land use change, we try to identify the deficiencies and try to address those deficiencies. Next slide, please. So deficiencies that we see in the proposed scenario is called mitigation. So what we do to address the deficiency, we call them mitigations. Whatever mitigations are feasible, we apply those mitigations to all the analysis that we have. It could be in different format. We could add another lane. We could, add sidewalks to see that it has all the multimodal transportation facilities in that particular road, as we actually try to see the future to be. It's a comprehensive and a wholesome approach that we try to give to the mitigation. Again, it's just not reducing congestion. It is also trying to make it ped and bike friendly. And once we see that the desired MOE's objectives and goals are achieved, we stop there. And that is where we give our conclusion and recommendation. Until then, it's an iterative process. Until we achieve the goal and objective, we keep on trying different feasible mitigation measures, something that's possible there. And that ends. And then we start then Based on that, we give our own conclusion and recommendation based on professional judgment and guidance. Next, let's think is about questions. Yeah.
Okay, so are there any questions about this transportation study? I guess first I'll ask if there are any questions from members of the public. Are there any questions from members of the public?
I'm not seeing any hands raised yet.
Okay, we should probably explain how to raise a hand.
Yes, if you have questions, there should be a there should be an icon at the bottom of your screen with a hand symbol that allows you to raise your hand.
Yeah, if you look in the, if you look in the participation, you click on I think you have to click on participants first, and then in the bottom right of the participants box, is that where it appears? That's the way I'm seeing it in any case.
That's where it would be.
Okay, I do see that our planning commissioner, Dan Lagana, has a hand raised. So Dan, why don't you ask your question? I think you may need to unmute him, yeah.
I'm unmuting him now. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing a microphone or an option to unmute him beside. Just a second. I'm not seeing that beside Commissioner Lagana's name. I've moved him up to panelist status to see if anything changes.
Thank you. Dan, you should be able to unmute yourself now if you're muted.
Hey, sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
I was just wondering if, first of all, thank you. I was dialed in on my phone and watching on the video, hence the confusion. I just had a quick question for either Tom or Arpita or someone from FCDOT. If you could just, I think, speak a little bit more to how you incorporate future land use considerations. For example, a project that hasn't been built yet or is approved into your planning.
Well, Arpita mentioned the Council of Governments in Washington, D.C. that covers our area of Virginia as well as the southeastern area of Maryland. Every couple of years, we have demographers at the Department of Planning and Development that take an entire county and they look at what's currently approved, I think, and Clara might be able to speak this as well, but I think they look at zoning cases as well, but I think the big thing they look at is the comp plan approvals, and they, everything can't be built out, so sometimes they have to make some educated decisions about how much of a site or several parcels can be built out, because the Council of Governments have control totals, and they basically tell Virginia, you have this much, or Fairfax County, you have this much, and we have to make some decisions about how to allocate the land uses for 2045. And then that gets fed into the travel demand model that Arpita mentioned, that forecasts the future traffic, allows us to develop the growth rates, which we then use to develop future volumes. I don't know if that was clear enough.
Yes, I think that's true. All of that's true, and so City of Alexandria also participates with COG, and a typical methodology is to do research on entitlements, especially recent entitlements are assumed to come online within the next 5 to 10 years. I think that that's the methodology that Fairfax County uses for employment forecasts. Population forecasts have a lot of different inputs, and those are updated annually in Fairfax County. But that's the background traffic for the immediate local area. And in this case, this portion of the transit station area, we assume the full build out of the comprehensive plan. We want that picture of the full build out for this immediate area. And so while this, yeah.
So just to replay, I think what I heard you say, and so I think we're clear, everyone on the phone is clear what staff means when they say MWCOG. MWCOG is the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and it's an association of all the governments in the Metropolitan Washington area, and they perform regional studies on behalf of the area governments. And I think what staff is saying is that every so often MWCOG conducts a demographic study, incorporates existing land use planning, and assumes a full build out in terms of their planning assumptions. And then staff uses those planning assumptions to model their traffic models. Is that correct?
It's a little bit different. They request that the jurisdictions give them the assumptions in increments of every 5 years of what will build out at different points in time.
Okay.
For all of Fairfax County, we do not assume that the comprehensive plan is fully built out in the next 20 years.
Okay.
So for transportation analysis, that's the background. What we assume will come online in the next 20 years. And we have fairly accurate forecasts.
That was my next question, was how accurate have the forecasts been in terms of your traffic studies?
Yeah, and of course the nearer term assumptions are always the most accurate. So very accurate when it's the next 5 to 10 years. A little bit less so 20 years out, but that's why we do the periodic updates. What I meant by full build out is that for this immediate transit station area, and I'm trying to, maybe Mike Linsky might say, or David or Tom, one of you might remember, for the surrounding land units, we assumed the full build out. We wanted to assume, even though in our forecast, we don't assume that this transit station area will be fully built out in the next 20 years. We do want that studied because we want impact. We want to understand the impact of all of this development in this very local area.
Right. So would it be true that in doing the traffic study doing this traffic study, you would the things that have been proposed in Kingstown, for example, and not yet built would be incorporated into that? You assume a full build out of those projects?
I think we had gotten that question before, and I don't have the answer. I haven't looked at the COG forecast yet to see what is assumed for that zone. If that entitlement, if that were going through the site plan process, yes, that would be assumed to have been built out. If that was an approval that hasn't moved in the last 5 years in the pipeline, then just some portion of that is assumed.
So if there's, say, a proposed out-turn comp plan amendment that's not part of this process and has not yet been approved, but is proposing an increase in density, that will not be taken into account because it hasn't. It's not on the books. Ah, okay, because there's some things going on in Kingstown that might have a big impact that ought to be considered. That have not yet been approved. All right, so I see that Randall and Karen Davis have a hand up.
And they are now unmuted.
Yes, thanks very much. This is Randall Davis. I certainly appreciate a very thorough presentation. It's very helpful. Just one quick question. I'm kind of new to the process in general. Is it typical that a transportation analysis is done by the applicant's consultants as opposed to consultants, say, that were picked by the county?
So the Department of Transportation, when we're studying a McLean, CBC, or Lincolnia, or an area that's in our comp plan and we want to update the recommendations in our comp plan for that area, the county selects its own consultants and does its own analysis. When there's, clerk speak this to, but when there's a business or a landowner that wants to push a site that might not be in our work program forward, then it's on them to provide the consultant services to do the work. But the county staff still reviews it very thoroughly, you know, as if we're doing it ourselves. We want to make sure that it's at the same level of quality and output.
Tom, this is David Gill, who's one of the nominators, and just building on that point, it is, I think, a way for the county to leverage their own resources. We do the study, we fund the study, but it is that the scoping is done by FCDOT. And basically, we're paying for it as the nominator, but it is under the direction and scope of SCDOT. And if they don't accept the results or what we've studied, then it's not presented. And we have to get it right based on what their direction is. So yes, it's nominally the applicants are producing the study, but it's largely, frankly, a matter of funding than anything else at the end of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other hands up for members of the public. I do see on the task force, Tom Sachs with a hand up. So go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. I want to build on what you were asking about. In Kingstown, we have two major apartment complexes approved by the Board of Supervisors. We have the Planning Commission voting on Wednesday to increase the plot where Top Golf is from 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre up to 10 dwelling units per acre. We have the Land Rover business going in right across the street from you guys. And at Van Dorn, just before the Beltway, we have a senior living facility similar to a nursing home. I'm not going to be able to vote for anything unless I can see documentation that all of this future development is included in whatever traffic projections are done. I don't care about what COG says. This is the county, and I want to see the county include every one of those developments at full build out. The other problem we have that I don't know how you account for is Alexandria does not like Fairfax County commuters going through on South Van Dorn. There is a huge bottleneck always at South Pickett. It clears up after that, but you can't get them to synchronize the lights to get maximum flow. And that is a real problem because Van Dorn has backed up all the way to Kingstown Boulevard currently without these new developments. And with that, I'll wait and hear what you have to say.
I would just add to what Tom said that the list of things going on in Kingstown, there's a big development planned in the town center area with residential buildings that have not yet been built out. So that needs to be considered as well.
Plus the units being approved, plus the unit being built eventually where Aldi and Lazy Boy are.
Right, of course.
Right.
Tom, this is David Gill. I mean, I think we've heard from all the task force members how important it is to make sure those background projects are incorporated. And we'll certainly make sure we've got that data in the study. I think it's an important data point to have, even if it's not maybe consistent with how we've treated other plan amendments. But we've heard loud and clear from task force members, they want to know what that is. And we think it's important as well to give a full picture of what is really happening on Van Dorn. So we'll work with Tom, the other Tom's group, to make sure it's part of our study efforts.
Great, David. Thank you.
Thank you. I would ask anyone who's already been called on to click on the hands to take their hand back down so that we It doesn't look like you have something else to say.
Ed, I'll add that there's a question in the chat as well. There's a question as to why is there a traffic signal icon shown on at Vine and Van Dorn Street when there is not currently a signal at that location?
If there's not a signal there, then that was an error on our part. We can remove it. But yeah, we would not assume a signal unless the analysis determined that a signal is necessary. We'll make that note. Sorry, appreciate that. Thank you.
I am seeing no more hands up.
I have a question. I can't figure out how to do the hand on my phone.
All right, go ahead, Carol.
My question, I guess, is for the county staff. When you talk about looking at full build out current versus possible changes, I'm assuming, for example, when we go from office to residential, which we're looking at in 006, that you take into consideration that the traffic flow, the trips will be 7 days a week, not 6. And that they also will be moving in the same direction as the current traffic, not opposite.
So, so our analysis is based on a typical weekday peak period, AM and PM. We don't look at a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. We look at a typical weekday AM period and a typical weekday PM period. It's based on national data, based on our models, and yeah, going from office to residential will probably mean more trips exiting Oakwood Road in the morning and more trips entering Oakwood Road in the afternoon. And that would definitely be part of the analysis, is assessing what that change means to the intersection of South Van Dorn and Oakwood.
But it's also critical to take into consideration that this traffic going from office to residential will be 7 days a week. And it's not uncommon for a trip down Van Dorn Street from Franconia Road to Pickett Street on a Saturday to take 30 minutes. And you're looking at dumping a lot more residential onto this already busy traffic, even on the weekends. And I said, so I think it should be looked at.
You are correct. It's not typically something we look at, but we can definitely give some thought to how we could address that.
Right, because as Tom Sachs mentioned, we're not looking just at this. We went in Kingstown Town Center from commercial to residential. We're looking at commercial to residential on Kingstown Boulevard, Top Golf. And in all of these cases, you're taking what is or was 5 days a week and dumping traffic on our community 7 days a week.
I'd like to say one thing in this case. What we do is we take the worst case scenario even when it is in the weekdays. So we are basically capturing worst case scenario that can, and when we address mitigation and we're trying to provide some improvement, it in a way will also take care of the weekend traffic, because the amount of congestion you see in a weekend, you're likely to see that even during the weekdays.
So Arbor is saying that the mitigation that we propose or that we work with the applicant to come up with will not only address that typical weekday, but it will help congestion on the weekends and other peak periods.
Yes, because the peak period congestion is normally you would see that level of congestion even on a weekend. And if that is saying that that doesn't occur during the rezoning stage, from the planning, there is a rezoning stage. There is a time that they do weekend analysis if that is needed. Sometimes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands raised, which tells me it should be time to move on to our next presentation. So I would throw the ball back to David Stinson to move forward with our next presentation.
Okay, can everyone hear me and see my presentation? Looks like it.
We can hear
yes,
you
we
just
can.
fine with a screen that says land use.
Great. All right, well, next we'll discuss the land use considerations for the Van Dorn TSA. As discussed at the last task force meeting, the base level plan recommendations for land unit D recommend industrial and office use up to 0.25 FAR on the north side of Oakwood Road and office use up to 0.5 FAR on the south side of Oakwood Road. The adopted plan also recommends an option for a mix of office, hotel, and retail uses up to 1.0 FAR if roadway and transit access is improved. Residential development may also be considered as a component of this mixed-use development if phasing requirements and noise mitigation requirements are met. The goal of the Van Dorn TSA is to provide opportunities for transit-oriented development in a more pedestrian-oriented development pattern. The board authorized this plan amendment to evaluate residential mixed use with office and self-storage as secondary use up to 850,000 square feet for 5605 Oakwood Road, and residential mixed use, including office, institutional, and industrial up to 1.0 FAR for 5400 5604 Oakwood Road. The amendment will also evaluate limited supportive commercial uses and modifications of residential phasing limitations. This amendment will need to study the impact of the land use change on the undeveloped portions of Land Unit E and its effect on the planned bridge connection over to Vine Street on the north side of the Beltway. Additionally, the plan amendment for the parcel located at 56 Oakwood Road would increase intensity from 1.0 FAR to 1.6 FAR. So we're going to review the transportation analysis in the fall and noise considerations later in this presentation. I am also interested in your thoughts on how self-storage use will fit with the TSA. But first, I would like to review the phasing conditions for Land Unit D that are recommended by the adopted comprehensive plan. So the adopted plan text for Land Unit D includes recommendations for phasing of the development of residential and non-residential components at the same time, or recommends that a substantial portion of the non-residential development is in place prior to the residential development. Now, the purpose of the phasing requirement is to ensure a mix of uses. However, the board authorization directed staff to evaluate the phasing conditions within Land Unit D. So in addition to your thoughts on self-storage and the mix of uses, what would it mean to you to remove the phasing requirements from the plan recommendation? If anyone has any comments, this would be a good time to discuss.
This is David Gill, the nominator. I mean, we would like to have a chance to present on this issue, and I think we had talked about it with staff making a presentation in the fall when we're back together. I think this is a fair thing for task force members to think about, but as the nominator, we think there's some advantages to getting rid of the phasing condition, and would like to at least be able to make that discussion with the task force members.
Yeah, thanks, David. And I think this is just to start thinking about all of the questions that the task force will need to balance and to weigh. We're not answering these questions tonight definitively. Nobody's developing a recommendation this evening. So we wanted to start this discussion and just start hearing these preliminary thoughts from the task force.
Understood, and it does help us, like with the traffic analysis, help us identify what data would help the task force in making their decision.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Clara. Any thoughts from task force members or members of the public regarding phasing?
This is Leah.
Go ahead, Leah.
So I have been involved in a number of cases where phasing was one of the conditions and phasing wasn't. I'd like to see a pro and con with and without phasing conditions, because I'm not sure in this constrained area how the phasing or not phasing conditions affect the development.
This is David. Leah, I get what your question is, and I think we can present something to that when we make our presentation.
I think some of what staff was thinking about when we thought about this question for the task force is, given today's market realities, what, I didn't know if the task force had, similar thoughts about what we would expect. I think often we see an interest in developing the residential portion of a development first. That's not universal. That's not always the case. And this is kind of tied to the mix of uses. The one non-residential use that has been suggested for the area is self-storage. So another related question about this mix of uses and what order they come in is what has the task force been thinking about that use combined with the proposed residential? If anything, if there are any concerns, or you think with design, if designed appropriately, you could see that working.
Well, right off the bat, depending on the load to the infrastructure during the construction process. I know when we had our development here at Hunter's Crest, which is right next to Crestley, there was a huge impact on the neighborhood during the build out. My concern in phasing, one, are you going to drive the market away if you schedule the phasing too far apart?
Sorry, Leah, you're getting kind of muffled. If you can talk more directly into a microphone, if that's possible, please do so.
Yeah, we're getting lots of thunder and lightning here too, so that's not helping. The phasing issue causes me some heartburn when we have too many things together or when we have it spaced too far apart. And we have a whole bunch of thunder in the area, so I apologize. The concern I have about removing phasing is that we could see a choke point for the entire area if we're not careful. So those are my concerns about phasing or removing phasing.
And so this is a concern about at the time of development and construction, those impacts?
Yes.
I see.
We had a huge problem with demolition and nails in the roads, and I mean it was kind of a sticky wicket all the way around.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
I have a comment. Go
ahead, Carol.
I think with respect to phasing, if this gets approved, if it gets changed and gets approved as some sort of a mixed use development, as opposed to exclusively residential, it should have phasing to ensure that all of the uses get built out. And I believe that self-storage is not an appropriate use in a residential neighborhood. And looking at it as part of the TSA, self-storage isn't going to be appropriate for this particular TSA because the metro is on the other side of the beltway. So you're not going to use self-storage coming by metro. So and as we've heard from discussions with Brandon, it's not appropriate in a residential neighborhood. And that's what the current comp plan states. And I think that should remain.
This is Liz Strobel. I represent one of the other nominators, and I just kind of think this is a discussion that we wanted to have when we're making a presentation, because we think that self-storage is designed differently today I'm also working on the one on Brandon Avenue. We've been working very closely with the Springfield Civic Association. So I think that, I guess we weren't really prepared to be kind of responding to things like this evening. I mean, I guess I didn't know that the task force members would be weighing in on aspects of our proposals without us providing a presentation. So
I obviously echo what Lynn's saying. I mean, it's a comprehensive plan that hasn't been implemented for 25 plus years, and I think we really appreciate the opportunity to present to the task force.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, when we met with you, David and Lynn, I think we said we wanted, I hope this is okay. We just wanted to initiate these questions, hear initial thoughts on this, understanding that there's missing information still with transportation analysis, and that really there's a lot of work for the task force to do to bring all of these considerations together. And thank you, Lynn, for bringing up the idea of innovations and design and more urban style self-storage. And so I think that's something the task force would have to look forward to in thinking about that, whether this use is appropriate, how it might fit in with residential. So I do also appreciate hearing from the task force that that's a concern. How do you integrate those two uses? The other, and I also appreciate the comment about phasing, whether it's at the time of construction or what that would do to the mix of uses. I think, these are things that staff has also thought about. And so, but it was worth asking. It was important to us to just ask if there was some other consideration about phasing that perhaps staff hadn't considered that was on the minds of the task force. Again, this is early days. This is early days for this plan amendment.
Okay.
I don't know, David, if you wanted to, if there were other comments about this topic, but we have a number of topics like this where we're taking a slice at a time. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that we don't seem to have any other comments from either the task force or the public at this point regarding phasing. And as is obvious to everyone, we will be coming back to this, no doubt. But maybe at this point, it's time to move on to the next topic.
Okay, when thinking about the overall mix of uses, we should consider what is happening in the city of Alexandria. As everyone knows, the city of Alexandria is directly north of the Van Dorn transit station area and impacts the study area. As stated at the last meeting, the Van Dorn Metro station platforms are in Fairfax County, but the station facilities and access to the station are in the city of Alexandria. A major influence to the Van Dorn TSA is the Eisenhower West Small Area Plan, adopted by Alexandria City Council in 2015. The Eisenhower West Small Area Plan is a long-term vision and development framework for this area. The plan recommends a mix of office, residential, and retail uses. Building heights will range from 10 to 20 stories in an area within 1/4 mile of the metro station, and will taper down in height in areas further away from the metro station, which will provide a transition to existing residential neighborhoods. Additionally, the city of Alexandria has proposed a bus rapid transit system operating in a combination of dedicated and shared lanes. This route will connect the Van Dorn Street Metro Station and Pentagon Transit Center, serving the Van Dorn Landmark and Beauregard corridors, including the Mark Center and the Shirlington Transit Centers. This proposal will be implemented in phases, with the first phase to be implemented in 2028. As staff evaluates the appropriate mix of uses, we will be mindful of the larger transit station area, including the portions within Alexandria. And I just wanted to see if anyone had any thoughts about, what was going on in Alexandria.
Okay, well, Does anybody have any comment about that?
And this is Holly Doherty.
Go ahead, Holly.
I think we should emulate what they're doing in Alexandria City. I've been really pleased with everything that I've seen there and their approach to development.
Oops, I think you're muted, Ed. Or I haven't been able to hear you.
I'm so
There you go.
sorry, yeah. Does anybody from the public have a comment? Hearing none. Are there, actually, I don't see whether there are any hands from the public at this point.
There's still a hand up from Randall and Karen, but I'm not sure. I'm just not sure if they put their hand down the first time or not, but I can unmute them if you'd like me to.
Yeah, why don't you see if there's something they wish to say?
Yes, we do. Hi, it's Karen. We're both here. With regard to emulating what's going on in the city of Alexandria, our land directly abuts these units, and I really don't want a 20-story office building behind us. I think we have to look at this land, the geography and topology of it, but also, since you brought up the city of Alexandria, this goes back to the traffic study. Eisenhower is between us and Pickett Street, which Carol referred to earlier as the choke point, or Carol and someone else referred to as the choke point. So I think whatever study has to consider what the next jurisdiction's doing, because it directly impacts on those of us who live within a quarter mile of the Beltway intersection.
Thank you. I don't know if there's any response. And I don't know if there's anybody else who wishes to make a comment.
I have a question. At one point, when you talk about what Alexandria is doing in this area, at one point, Alexandria was looking at removing the current interchange with Van Dorn and Duke and going back to a at-grade intersection. Do you know if that's been nixed from their plan?
I do not know, but I can look into that and get back to you. Tom, or do you know, Tom or Arpita, do you know anything about that?
I had not heard anything about them downplaying the interchange.
Yeah, that was quite a few years ago when they first started looking at raising Landmark Shopping Center and rebuilding it. And that was one of the plans, or one of the thoughts that they were considering, was to change that intersection.
Carol,
I remember when it was.
Carol, I took a look at the plan for Landmark a few weeks ago.
Okay, I haven't done that.
I believe that the plan is still in place to make that an at-grade intersection.
Okay.
Because they want to tie it in more with the street grid, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I meant to look at that, but haven't had a chance. Because I remember when it used to be at grade.
Well, you're dating yourself, Carol.
Yes, I know.
I have a question. It was mentioned that the Alexandria is planning a bus rapid transit from the Pentagon to Van Dorn Street Metro. Is there any thought of trying to get Fairfax County to participate in that and extend it further into Kingstown?
So the city of Alexandria is very far ahead of us in that. I think we had some conversations a few years ago when Supervisor McKay at the time expressed a very similar interest. And ARPA actually did some right-of-way exercises to see what kind of right-of-way impacts there might be if we had BRT on South Van Dorn. But that has not moved forward on the county side. And part of that is because we realized that the city was so far ahead, we weren't going to get them to stop their process. But you know, it's something that could be done in the future if Fairfax County and Alexandria feel there's merit.
Okay, it might be worth looking into.
Ed, this is David Gill. That's actually a great question. I represented a client at the Plaza at Landmark, which is the shopping center just on the Fairfax side near Landmark Mall, and we looked at the same time into extending Alexandria's BRT as part of that plan amendment. And Claire was actually a little bit part of that discussion as well about trying to work with the city in extending it over 395 and making a terminus on Fairfax's side. I think what we settled for was having a discussion of, frankly, a shuttle to tie into their BRT service until Fairfax County could do the appropriate studies to look at pulling it further up Little River Turnpike, for example. And I think we'd be open to the same thing in Van Dorn.
Thanks very much. Okay. Anybody else with a question or comment on this subject?
I wanted to acknowledge that I am following some of the chat questions, and one question was for transportation about whether any of the intersections in the city of Alexandria, specifically Eisenhower, I believe, would be included in the study or could be included.
I don't think that's been decided yet. Once the applicants have their consultants in place, I'm sure we'll have a scoping meeting, and if that is something that some of the citizens or task force members are interested in, that's something we can certainly discuss. I think the intersection with Eisenhower might make sense at the very least.
Yeah, and then some other comments have to do just characterizing the area as a gateway to Fairfax County. That's making reference to making a good impression and design, and questioning, what uses, like a branded self-storage might not be a good choice. And then some references to policy about development in residential communities and discouraging commercial uses. So I think those are all things we're taking note of, and we can bring back. Yep.
To what extent is there cooperation between Fairfax County staff and the city of Alexandria in dealing with border issues such as we're dealing with here?
Well, there are regular check-ins. And it's different with every jurisdiction we work with. I would say we work with each jurisdiction differently. The city of Alexandria in particular is very keen to check in regularly with Fairfax County. We meet 2 to 3 times a year to review pending cases, land use changes on either side. The projects that David Gill was talking about that involve more frequent coordination with Landmark Mall changes happening at the same time as, sorry, David, you'll have to tell me the name of that shopping center.
Plaza at Landmark.
Plaza at Landmark, thank you. So when there are joint changes, we have talked to the city of Alexandria about the proposed changes that we're considering here at this transit station area. But there are barriers here, and so that not as much coordination is probably required, but we keep each other informed. Okay, answers your question.
Thank you. All right, so seeing no more comments on this subject, I think it's time to move on to the next.
Okay, next we'll be discussing the environmental analysis, and joining us for the discussion is Katie Torgerson from Stormwater Management and Corinne Bebeck from the Department of Planning and Development in our Environmental and Development Review Branch. As stated at the last task force meeting, the subject area is located within the Cameron Run watershed and contains tributary streams of this watershed. The comprehensive plan recommends protection of the streams within the Cameron Run watershed and incorporation of those streams into environmental quality corridors. It is possible the streams located within the subject property qualify as environmental quality corridors. So further evaluation, delineation of these potential environmental quality corridors areas will be required prior to development. Additionally, a portion of the subject property located at 5605 Oakwood Road and also a portion of Land Unit E, which is also part of the study area, contain a resource protection area. The resource protection areas located in the Van Dorn TSA are depicted on the map as RPA. Resource protection areas are designated by the county to comply with the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance. The Chesapeake Bay Ordinance's purpose is to protect local streams that drain into the Chesapeake Bay. The area of the subject property classified as a resource protection area per the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance are protected from most development. Next is a tree cover map, and as you can see, the majority of the subject area contains existing tree cover, which is depicted on the map in green. Now, the tree cover obviously will change with new development. Department of Urban Forestry has stated that the subject property contains tree cover that's in fair to good condition, and there's an opportunity to preserve these trees on the site. The comprehensive plan encourages the conservation and restoration of tree cover with new developments. Tree canopy, vegetative diversity, and canopy evaluation would all be evaluated as part of any zoning application on the subject property. There's also plan guidance specific to the subject area encouraging the preservation and replanting of trees, particularly on steep slopes, to buffer development along Oakwood Road from surrounding uses. The next map depicts the soils of the subject property, which include marine clay soils. Over 70% of Land Unit D contains marine clay soils, which are prone to shrinkage and swelling. The comprehensive plan recommends that new development avoid problem soils or implement appropriate measures to protect new structures from unsuitable soils. Since the subject area contains portions of mapped marine clay soils, a geotechnical study for the determination of soil stability and foundation support should be requested at the time of a zoning review. And the comprehensive plan recommends minimizing human exposure to unhelpful levels of transportation generated noise and expects new development to be regulated to ensure people are protected from this noise. A noise study and potential mitigation practices should be reviewed as part of any zoning application. Again, the zoning ordinance also includes noise-related building setbacks that apply to the area around the Capitol Beltway that restrict commercial or industrial industrial structures, within 75 feet of an interstate highway, and residential structures within 200 feet of a highway. The 200-foot and 75-foot setbacks are depicted on the map in crosshatch.
David, this is I thought those setbacks were measured from travel lanes, not property lines.
Maybe Kareen can help us. Kareen, our environmental planner, is on the line.
And just as a follow-up question, these setbacks are in TSA areas routinely modified in order to accomplish other land use goals, especially related to, being close to a metro, correct?
Well, they can be, right?
They can
I
be.
think staff
Fair
would
enough.
stop short of routinely, but it can
Okay,
be because
that's fair.
there are many plan objectives, many plan goals. And so I think this is, like I said, we're taking a slice at each issue, but when it comes time to considering all those plan objectives, we'll have to think about, and I know you, David, and Lynn, and your teams will think about how to propose something that addresses this while meeting plan objectives. Kareen, I'm not sure if you heard the question. Is it from the travel lane or the right of way? Go ahead.
Yes, I did hear the question. I am pulling up the zoning ordinance right now, so I will chime back in as soon as I have the specific ordinance section pulled up. Thank you.
Got it.
This is Malik Linsky. I'm not sure the ordinance specifies that, but I had one case I was working on. It was a small property, and that This was years ago when they came back, ZAD came back with the interpretation that it was from the right-of-way line, but it's possible they've interpreted it differently since then, so we should probably check on that.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, I mean, Corinne may find something else, but it may be that continues to be a question and that these patterns are set back closer to the Beltway. Go ahead, David. I'm not sure if we had another slide on this section.
I know that's the final environmental slide.
Okay, are there any questions or comments with regard to environmental issues? Hearing none.
And I don't see any in the
Don't
public.
see any hands. All right, well then let's move on. I think we still have schools and parks to get to, if I'm not mistaken.
All right, well, we'll now go over the analysis of the schools serving the TSA and the potential student yield that may be generated from development proposed by this comprehensive plan amendment. This evening, Pranita Rambizi and Paul Nago from Fairfax County Public Schools will also be joining us for the discussion. So the information regarding schools is provided to us by Fairfax County Schools. The schools serving the subject property are Edison High School, Twain Middle School, and Bush Hill Elementary. Currently, Edison High School has a slight capacity deficit. Twain Middle School has a mild capacity deficit, and Bush Hill Elementary School has a capacity surplus. The school capacity table shows the student membership as of 2019 and the 5-year projection for school year 2024 and 2025. The 5-year student membership projections and individual school capacity evaluations are updated annually by Fairfax County Public Schools. Membership projections are not available beyond a 5-year horizon. An assessment of facility capacity was not completed for school year 2020-2021, and the program capacity utilization was not calculated due to a virtual start of the school year and ongoing planning for return to school with social distancing, which requires, using all available rooms for core instruction. Before you is the comparison of the potential student yield for the adopted comprehensive plan and the proposed comprehensive plan, which is calculated by using the current countywide student yield ratio. Now, because the type of multifamily building has not been decided, the low-rise and mid-rise multifamily student yield ratios were used, which is why there is a range for the potential student yield for the multifamily option. According to the countywide student yield ratios, low-rise multifamily units, which are 4 stories or less, typically generate more students than the mid to high-rise residential units, which are 5 stories and above. The residential development recommended by the adopted comprehensive plan is projected to generate, 52 to 154 students, depending on the type of multifamily residential units. And this is the adopted plan right now. The townhouse option for the proposed plan amendment will generate 29 students, which is a 75 to 177 additional students above the adopted comprehensive plan. The multifamily option would generate 40 to 409 students, which is a delta of 88 to 255 additional students above the comprehensive plan. Now, the potential solutions for schools are found in the capital improvement program, this is the capital improvement program for fiscal year 2021-2025, and it includes potential solutions to alleviate current and projected school capacity deficits. For consideration, as many options as possible have been identified for each school. Any option chosen for implementation, of course, would be discussed and decided through a transparent process with appropriate stakeholders in accordance with the school board policies and regulations. So the options considered for Thomas Edison High School are marked in parentheses as a HS. The options considered for Twain Middle School are marked with an MS, and the options for Bush Hill Elementary are marked with ES. So as you can see, the options include increasing efficiency by reassigning instructional space of a school to accommodate increases in membership, which is a potential solution for Thomas Edison High School and Twain Middle School. There's also a capacity enhancement through either a modular or building addition, which is a potential solution for Twain Middle School, or a boundary adjustment with schools that have capacity surplus, which is a potential solution for Edison High School. Now, because Bush Hill Elementary School has a capacity surplus, the potential solution is just to monitor school membership. Does anyone have any questions about schools or the student projections?
Dave Stinson, I'm sorry, this is David Gill again. Just on the existing student projection that you have under the plan, does the plan specify multifamily?
Yes, it specifies multifamily, yes.
This is Carol
Versus-
Allen. I have a question. If Bush Hill Elementary School has a capacity surplus, why are our students in trailers?
I know sometimes there are distinctions in modular units. If they're plumbed, have plumbing and air conditioning, I think that's considered a more permanent structure. But perhaps our school staff that's on the line happens to have on hand about information about Bush Hill.
Because we didn't have those until they added the advanced learning program to that school.
Because modular units are considered part of the, like as Clara said, part of the actual school capacity.
That capacity, yeah. And then there are temporary trailers, that are not considered that. So who was the staff here from schools? That was
Yes, this is Pranita, and I'm from FCPS. No problem. So for Bush Hill, right now we don't have any temporary classrooms according to our CIP. But just to build on to what you were saying, Clara, it could be programmatic reasons. It could be temporary construction. It could also be if the modular addition is considered as part of capacity, but like you said, the temporary classrooms and trailers are not. But I can always check back and get back to you. But as of right now, in our CIP, we don't have any count for our trailers.
Okay. Thank you. And thanks for the question. Thanks, Pranita. So, I mean, I know we have a list going of questions and information we need to return to the task force with. So this will be one of them.
I think Tom Sachs has his hand up.
I do.
Go
I
ahead,
understand that the projections only go out to 2024, 2025. But that's not really adequate given all of the planned construction in Kingstown. By 2025, we're potentially going to have the development where Topgolf is, plus the 2 multi-story apartment buildings at the town center. I think it's really important that any projections include projections from what that would do to capacity. And I speak from some experience. I moved to Fairfax County in 1963 in Kings Park. The county was building a school. The parents said it's too small. And before it was even finished, they were planning an addition and an additional school. You need to look long-term. You can't just look 3 or 4 years out.
Yeah, got it. And I think that's a comment that we have heard from different communities. We do rely on schools to do those projections. And so I'm sure Pranita can take that back to schools and
Yes. Yeah, we have that
comment
noted. Yeah, because that was one of the concerns we have had to is just to kind of not look at one plan amendment, but have more of a comprehensive review. Because like you mentioned, it's not just about Van Dorn, but there's Huntington Metro Station that's being reviewed. There's Huntington Avenue, Top Golf site, all fall within the Edison High School pyramid. For our projections, though, when we review them annually for 5 years, we look at projects that are either under construction or that are expected to go into construction in the next 5 years, which would yield students. But we don't look at projects that are approved and we don't know when they're going to break ground, which is why we review them annually. But like I said, yes, a more comprehensive review is necessary just to be able to look at what's happening in the area for these schools.
So there's a bad echo on that last comment. So if please everyone make sure you're muted if you're not speaking.
And thank you, Pranita. I think that's something we can do then, is we can look at the whole pyramid, at least look at the planning stage to see what the cumulative and individual impacts should be of those developments to get that picture. And that's something that sounds like that's doable.
Is there any thought of building any additional elementary schools in the area?
So in the comprehensive plan, we identified a need. I think it was in the Embark plan amendment. There's a Route 1 elementary school that has been identified. And that's already in the adopted comprehensive plan. It's in the same corridor, but again, it's a little further down. I believe there's no other elementary school that has been identified yet, or we don't have a site yet. There is in our CIP, Virginia Hills Center, which is identified as for repurposing. But again, it's not identified for an elementary school site.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Virginia Hills Center has been identified as what?
For repurposing.
Oh, so, repurposing. Okay. Yeah, I know it's
right.
Offices now. It's an old elementary school.
Right.
Okay, so, but there's no thought of turning it back into a school, if I understand you correctly.
Correct. That has not been identified by the school board yet.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, if there are no other questions.
Ed, sorry, this is David Gill again. I apologize.
Go ahead, David.
For this issue. I'm looking at the comprehensive plan. It only talks about residential. It doesn't specifically say multifamily. And Clara, I think we need to have a more direct conversation about what the existing plan it does say or doesn't say for purposes of a lot of these analyses.
Yeah, I think what David's talking about is that we make an assumption. We have to interpret the comprehensive plan since it comes with so much flexibility. It comes with a mix of uses and a stated intensity. And we need to come up with an estimate. We can't test all of the variables of the current comprehensive plan. And so considering that this is a transit station area that talks about mixed use development of a certain character, we did assume multifamily development for the current comprehensive plan.
Understood. And I guess from our perspective as the nominator, the heart of our nomination is not to revisit the density, not to revisit even the use mix unless people felt that residential, a little bit higher on the residential made more sense for a variety of policy reasons, but to really realize that we haven't been able to implement a plan for 25 years and all we're asking to change is the phasing requirement, not revisit density, not revisit use. And I'm worried that the way these are being portrayed implies that we're projecting a significant change in use, and that's not how we're viewing it. And I just want to make sure we have that.
Okay.
We're looking at apples to apples in front of the task force.
Okay. Well, and it might be, and I know we're short on time and there's some discussion. It may be that we postpone the parks discussion, especially since the parks planner wasn't able to join us this evening. Maybe we can postpone that for a different meeting.
Why don't we do
a short
that?
piece.
Okay.
But in response to what David's talking about, the authorization sets the parameters for the plan amendment, but at the same time, we're aware that there are nominators that have a specific proposal to consider. But there's some latitude there, and staff is considering, and it would be jointly with the nominators, alternatives beside what was proposed from the nominator. So we did compare our estimate of the current comprehensive plan to those nominations. But some of these questions are getting at what is the appropriate recommendation? What is the right mix? I mean, I think staff would not like to only look at the nominations, but we'd like to think about a little bit about what the long-term best uses for this area and engage in that, at least at this point in the process. And I think, you know, there's a lot to consider. We wanted to present slices of these issues that where staff is consulted with other agencies to provide some of this initial feedback. I'm happy to talk to David offline, and maybe we relook at what we've assumed for the adoptive plan. That's something we can do. What the task force can expect in the future, in addition to the transportation analysis that was discussed earlier in the meeting, are presentations from the nominators to make the case for what their vision is for these properties, you know, representing these landowners. And then the work of all of us trying to come together with what is the right recommendation and how do we address some of these issues. But I think all of that, putting the issues together will happen in the fall. So I think that's what I would say the task force could expect in future meetings.
Thank you. All right. So I think that concludes the business for tonight, other than to talk about our future meetings. We have the prospect of staring us in the face of meeting in person in the future. And perhaps if I could turn this over to Steve Waller to talk about how that is shaping up in terms of what is required of us and how we can expect to move forward.
Thanks, Ed. So we are currently in a position where we have to prepare for the ultimate, I guess, reality of having in-person meetings as far as the task force is concerned. And it's my understanding that each meeting would have to have a quorum of task force members in person. And so one of the things that we kind of want to get to have the task force thinking about in the short term is who feels they would be available to meet at a location, and most available to meet at a location with a group of their fellow task force members, and also looking at the possibility of using one of the rooms at or a combined room, if we're able to combine rooms at the Highland South County Center for that location. So I don't think we're at a position right now where we want to poll the task force members, but we at least want to send out an email to kind of see where everyone's point of thinking is at this point. And just from the informal discussion that was going on at the beginning of the meeting, I know that there are several members who prefer this style of meeting, not only for the concerns with health and safety, but also for the convenience, as far as getting to the sites, versus getting to the sites, navigating traffic and everything like that. So there's just some considerations that we want the task force members to have in mind and be prepared for as we continue to get information that's leading to reconvening at a location for and having quorums.
Right. So, I mean, under normal circumstances, we would be meeting at the Franconia Government Center. The community room there, once you get to about 50 people, starts to feel quite crowded. That's in normal circumstances. Given COVID social distancing, I think it would start to feel quite crowded long before we got to 50 people in that room. So I'm hoping that if we do indeed need to meet in person, that we can find a larger room at the Highland South County Government Center. But I would like some feedback from the committee about whether that would be a good move or not. I'd also like to hear, Steve, of any about any vision you might have or the staff might have about how we can incorporate an online element into future meetings, both to include the public at large and any members who might not be comfortable meeting in person. So hopefully we could have a quorum in person if we are required to do that, but have additional members participating online. I have trouble envisioning just how the technology would work for that, but anything you can help us with in that regard, we appreciate it.
And
Yeah,
we are testing. I'm sorry, there's an echo. We are in the process of testing some new equipment that that the county's IT department has procured for the purposes of being able to have in-person meetings with the possibilities of having the public access those meetings in a virtual, I guess, broadcast type of setting. And we have some conference microphones and also some cameras with tripods that could set on the tables and easily be maneuvered. And there was also an idea of possibly having for members in attendance, if there isn't a large enough table to fit all 20 plus task force members, there's a possibility for setting up the room with what would be a virtual podium as well when for questions and answers. But there's some ideas in planning, some ideas that are in the early planning process, and we hope to be able to have some better information for the task force once all that has been tested. So.
Ed, can I jump in here a second? Did you say something, Ed?
I'm sorry, I thought I was speaking, but apparently I was muted.
You were speaking.
Go ahead, Steve.
All right, thank
What do
you.
you want to say?
I've had a little bit of experience with this type of format, and it's really critical to get the right policies in place and meeting rules in place if it's going to work well. The example of that is that you've got to have a mic ready for audience questions or panelist questions, or else the people on the other end of the technology just can't hear anything and get frustrated and think that something's wrong. So you've got to have a way that if there's a question asked from the audience, the speaker's instructed to repeat it. That sort of simple thing. This is not rocket science, but it does need to be thought through before you go to that format.
That's a good point. I think with the virtual podium that Steve Waller had mentioned, and Steve, please correct me if I misunderstand this, but the idea would be that each speaker in the room would have to like get up and go to that podium so that he or she could be seen and heard by those online. Am I correct about that?
It would only be the speakers who are not at the table. So it would be, you would have to think if you had a specific number of task force members who are at the table and surrounding the Polycom microphone that'll be picked up to the host. I mean, that'll be connected to the host laptop. Anyone else who can't fit at that table would have to step to the virtual podium. So it wouldn't require members of the task force who are sitting at a round table to go to that particular location in the room. It would basically be if there was someone in the audience, similar to what you see at the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors hearings, when a member of the public or someone who is presenting maybe an applicant who needs to step forward and answer questions or present some information, how they step to a podium at one of those types of public hearings, that would be similar to what we would be trying to do with the virtual podium. And that way there would be a camera. So when that person steps to the room, anyone who's watching the broadcast, I call it a broadcast because anyone who would be watching the meeting would also be able to see that person who came forward to provide testimony or ask questions. So that's and there's nothing stopping us from doing too. The only thing that we'd have to do to make sure that it works without interference is making sure that when someone is speaking at one of those laptops, that the main microphone is muted, and also uh, any other devices inside the room are muted, so there's no feedback or echoing.
We also, it would be important to make sure there's a way to get input from those online as well. So it's not a broadcast in the sense of going one way, just out, but it needs to be interactive, going both ways.
In the current plan would still be to use this.
Tom, could you mute yourself, please?
The current plan would be to continue using this WebEx interface that we have right now. So anyone who's not in the room would still have an opportunity to raise their hand. There would still be a staff member monitoring the hand raises, monitoring any chat and everything like that. So when I use the term broadcast, because I was just thinking there's going to be one main computer, and most of the people who are involved in the task force their voices would carry from that main computer. But I didn't mean broadcast as a way of saying that it's no longer interactive, because we would still be using this same WebEx interface with staff monitoring the interaction that's coming in from various places. So.
Can I get a sense from the task force?
Ed, my hand's up. Can I say a couple of things?
Sure, Tom, go ahead.
If this was 3 or 4 weeks ago when our cases were between 5 and 15, I would be all in favor of doing this. But with the new, more contagious variant and cases up in the 60, 70 range, I don't think this is a discussion we should be having at all. It's much too early, because we don't have a handle on it anymore. The other thing is, when we get to that point, I'd like to look and see if there's a way we could do the meeting at Edison High School in the auditorium or something like that, so it's convenient, rather than going to a building outside the area. But I know at this point, with the case count what it is, I wouldn't be interested in attending in person at all.
The problem we have, Tom, is that we may be required to do this. I don't think any of us, certainly not me, wishes to do this. I would like to be able to keep meeting as we are, but we're only legally authorized to do this so long as there's a state of emergency declared by the county. So if that changes, and perhaps it won't, but the current thinking, I believe, is that it will, then, unless the law itself changes, we're faced with having to find a way to make this work. I think going to a high school auditorium would be an excellent solution if the schools would allow us. I'm not so sure that they will. They may not want additional people coming into their buildings. That's my current understanding anyway.
Ed, this is John again, and I'm just curious. EQUAC went back in person with no hybrid this month. We were told we couldn't do hybrid, and we had to be back in person. So we've already done our July meeting in person and have no plans to going back because we were told we couldn't do hybrid. Now I'm curious. Does this have to do with the different types of meetings? I mean, what is the difference here?
Yeah,
I've like other meetings that are doing different versions of this too, and there doesn't seem to be a consistency across the county committees.
Yeah, I think another way to describe it is when the emergency orders are lifted, we will be required to have an in-person meeting. This is an in-person meeting, but just the nature of the work we do and our staff is very interested in trying to maintain the benefits of that virtual participation. And we don't have the ability to do that today. We're assembling the technology, we're testing it in different locations. We would very much like to retain as much of that virtual component as we can while still having to meet the letter of what it means to have an in-person meeting. So it's not really, it's hybrid only in that we want the outside community to continue to participate virtually, but this is still an in-person meeting, like EQUAC is having an in-person meeting, but I don't know if EQUAC staff, they're continuing to meet. We're talking about September.
EQUAC met in July, and we're going to meet in August in person. There's no virtual component at all for the public or anybody. The public they have to come to our meetings. So, I mean, that's what has me confused. If you want to bring this, if we have to bring this meeting back to in person and just leave the virtual for the public, that's one thing. But I mean, that's what confused me. Why is EQUAC going back? And some of the others, tomorrow we have a hybrid one for Northern Virginia Soil and Water. That's a little bit different animal, I understand. It's not completely county. But, it just kind of confuses me. I definitely understand the public being involved on this. And I personally don't want to come back in person. I agree with what Tom said. But you made this sound like there would be options for the task force to still, as long as you had quorum in person, to still tune in, to link in.
Well, we still have to have quorum now virtually. So that doesn't change. You can't have a meeting at all without quorum. So that's the main point. If enough people aren't dedicated and committed to showing up to these meetings in person,
we would all need to come back in person to make this work, and only the public, the non-task force public, could have the access via the online version.
I think that's not quite it, John. I think we would need a quorum in person, but then we could have additional members online with all members fully participating.
Now there's a limit to the number of meetings. It's my understanding that if you cannot make it to meetings, you only have 2 meetings where you cannot be in person. That's my understanding.
Yeah, and
based on the law.
Well, that would be a problem.
Yeah, and so
that has to change.
And a lot can change. I think that was already said, that there is so much uncertainty that we are having to plan for this in-person meeting with what we know today. And this might all change. This has been.
I noticed Tom Sachs in the chat. Oh, no, excuse me. It was Holly Doherty in the chat. Said this is a great issue to raise with the General Assembly special session. And I have already spoken to Delegate Mark Sickles about this. I can bring it up with the senator as well, though I have not yet done so. The feedback from Mark Sickles was that he's gotten a lot of similar comments from others who, we're involved in other sorts of public meetings. So we're not the only ones making this point. However, the special session that's going to be starting shortly has been called for other purposes. Whether they can take up any legislation to address this issue is kind of up in the air. I don't think we can count on that. It may be a possibility, but we can't count on it. So, you know, I'm doing whatever I can to encourage them to take this up, but who knows what's going to happen. As things develop, perhaps it might make sense for us to have an online meeting in August, simply to update everyone on the status of what's going to be happening in September. I don't yet know that that's going to make sense, but maybe it will. So I guess stay tuned on that. Anybody else have any points they wish to make? Or does anybody want to express any thoughts regarding the South County Center idea? I know Tom's already mentioned the idea that it would be better at a high school.
Jim,
anybody else have thoughts on that?
Jim Drinkard, I would have a tougher time getting to South County. The high school lady would be fine. The government center would be fine, but South County is going to be an issue for me, just where I live.
Would you, Jim, would you prefer meeting at Franconia Government Center?
That would be fine. It's almost the same for me as Edison.
Ed or whoever, does anybody know, are the schools allowing outside meetings to use their space right now? Because
not at this point.
Yeah, I
Not
was
at
going to
this
say,
point.
I think that's what I had heard before, and I didn't know if that loosened up, because they may not be allowing any public meetings to be using, or any reason to be using the.
That's what I thought. I wonder if it might be possible, you know, since we need a quorum of 14, to perhaps have a in-person meeting limited to 14 members who basically would reserve their spaces ahead of time to meet in person at the Franconia Government Center with everyone else online.
You still run into that issue with the two meetings, missing two meetings?
Well, we have to get that. If that is a rule that's in effect, then we might as well give up the ghost now, because there is no way that we can effectively go forward with some of our important members who are not going to be able to attend any in-person meetings and will, of necessity, have to miss more than 2 in-person meetings. If that's the way it is, then we might as well just give it up right now.
Yeah, and I think that's the feedback we were looking for tonight. We want, because some task force, some groups have all agreed they want to meet in person, as you've heard. Some groups have a mix of people who are willing to, not concerned about it, and others that have a different risk, you know, in their life or in their homes that they need to contend with. And so that's what we needed to understand from this task force. But to your question about, could we reserve that? We did ask that question. We posed that question to the county attorney. Could we just have the quorum? The nature of the public meeting, as they understand it, is that it needs to be open to the public.
This meeting is open to the public, and any future meeting that is partially online would be just as much open to the public.
Yeah, there you go. So I think we are looking for new rules and understanding the realities and the concerns of this task force. We just have to take that back and see what we can manage, either with the local state of emergency or something at the state level. I think those are places we're trying to figure out how to conduct business.
Right. The whole purpose of the public meetings rules is to be inclusive. We are now, if we apply the rules as you are stating, it becomes the reverse of that, and it is excluding people. And that we need to avoid.
And
So there is no way this task force is going to go forward with excluding members who are important to this task force simply because they're not able to come to in-person meetings.
And we understand your concern, Ed, and you just have to understand that I guess the decisions aren't really being made by anyone who's on this call right now, and we truly sympathize and empathize with the issues you brought forth, and it's just going to take more discussion. And you know, as for now, I encourage anyone who has concerns about the opening back up of in-person meetings, and anything that you've heard tonight about where the current regulations stand, to please send an email to Ed, and you can also copy me, and you know, we will make sure that any information that we're receiving is sent forth not only to the county attorney's office, but also provided to Supervisor Lush. So
it seems to me that missing 2 meetings rule is just an interpretation. You know, someone who is online participating in a meeting is not missing the meeting. So maybe it's just a question of correcting an interpretation. But with that interpretation, we cannot go forward.
and we
Yeah,
again
got
we
it,
can
got it. Yeah.
and we'll make sure that all these concerns are brought forward to Supervisor Lusk and to the county attorney's office for
I think,
for
I
further
don't think
input.
it's a question of Supervisor Lusk. I think it's a question for the county attorney's office.
I'm just bringing up Supervisor Lusk because he's the one who appointed the task force, and I want him to, if it's his district, and if there are any concerns about whether or not the task force moves forward with any of the plan amendments, he needs to be on the front line too, and he may be your best advocate to get this stuff, to get something going on, you know, with what you need to do. So that's why we need to keep him in the loop.
And I think, and staff will stay in communication with you. Steve is following the daily changes to our understanding of what we can and can't do with these meetings. And so our understanding of what we can do evolves. I mean, it's even within the realm of possibility that we can continue virtual meetings. We're going to plan for an in-person meeting if that's possible, but happy to do a virtual meeting if that's allowed. I think that would be, I think it's okay for me to say that would be at this point our preference, because even within our staff family, we have risks that we want to support our staff with young families and with other risks.
Of course. I hope so. Okay, everybody. So stay tuned. There's a lot yet to be decided. But I thank everybody who helped with this meeting. Steve, Clara, all the David, of course, and all the other staff who participated, and everyone, all the members and members of the public. Thank you very much. Again, stay tuned for further information, and our next scheduled meeting is September 27th, is it, I think? Yeah. Okay. Well, good night and thanks again.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.